Well, boils and ghouls, it's your old pal, John Cusir, the voice of the Crypt Keeper. And I want to welcome my good fiends of the Horror Heals podcast. Is horror good for mental wellness? But of course it is. I delight in the delicious deaths of pitiful people on the silver screen. So get ready for a hell of a good time with my new fiends, Corey and Kendall, on the Horror Heals podcast.
Hey there, spooky souls and creeps that heal. Welcome back to Horror Heals. I'm Corey, and while Kendall isn't on this intro, don't worry, he is in the episode, asking the good questions and sharing his deep love for the others, and of course, Jason Voorhees. Today's guests? A couple after our own spooky hearts. Vienna and John, horror fans, creators, parents of a self-proclaimed spooky girl, and the wicked minds behind the upcoming gothic novel, Victoria Frankenstein, The Dread Legacies, Book 1, coming this October. So we're talking everything from Halloween movies and trick-or-treat chaos to killer clowns, haunted book collections, how horror actually helps you build better relationships, and what it's like to create an original take on Frankenstein that's rooted in science, empathy, and glowing veins. Also, yes, we talk about Fear Street, and we agree that paper cutters should be classified as horror weapons. So let's dig right into it, because horror isn't just about the monsters and gore, it's about connection, catharsis, and the kind of creativity that glows in the dark. Vienna, John, thank you for joining us on the Horror Heals podcast.
Thank you for having us.
We love seeing another couple that are into horror like we are. Have you been a horror fan since you were kids?
Yes. So it started really early with me. I grew up in Minnesota, and so it was very much like we would go out into the dark in the 90s and Halloween, and there would just be a sea of children, and they'd be chaperoned by their parents while they're wearing their costumes because you can't see out of them, and there's very little light in the street. And I loved it. I'm 4, 5, 6 years old, walking the streets going, it's dark, it's scary, and there's a bunch of children around. Man, this is fun. And so it slowly turned into when Scholastic would release all of these Halloween themed books. So, you've got Clifford, you've got Corduroy Bear, you've got the Berenstain Bears, and now they're carbon pumpkins. And I'm like, what? My favorite thing? You also have Halloween themes? So it slowly turned into that for me. And then it turned into my friend introducing me to Goosebumps. And I was like, they write books just about scary things all the time. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, oh my gosh. So it kind of just turned into this slow evolution of me falling in love with horror through all the stages, especially as a kid. And then as you get into adulthood, especially with my sisters, whoever Halloween would buy the entire film collection for A Nightmare on Elm Street or Michael Myers, and we'd just sit there all Halloween watching these movies. So I watched pretty much every horror movie that came out before 1994, before I was 10.
Awesome. Good. Vienna, how about you? How did you get into horror?
It was a little different, not necessarily jumping into horror. It was more an early start for the love of the macabre. I grew up really looking up to my mom, who was an 80s goth, kind of, just loving all of that, the aesthetic, the music, and all of that. So I already had it in mind. I wanted to be as witchy as possible, just like my mom then. And then I started to slowly over time discover the genre as a child, just like John. Goosebumps, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. I did so many dramatic retellings of those stories. I would memorize them. And oh yeah, I was a blast at children's birthday parties. So yeah, it kind of just grew from that and then amplified when John and I ended up getting together. I was getting introduced to an array of movies since, as an early age, John had been introduced to it, whereas I wasn't so much. It was more the stories that I kind of grasped and jumped into.
When I first met her, I went into a room and saw her bookshelf full of books, and she had Clive Barker books that weren't Hellraiser. And I was like, what are those? And she's like, please don't ask about those. But they were horror books. And I was just like, I fell in love immediately. I was like, oh, a woman who has a bookshelf full of just books. I just couldn't help myself,
Every time we do one of these interviews, like it conjures memories. And I know before we were recording, we were talking about horror cons and meeting like icons and stuff. But meeting Clive Barker, woo, that was incredible because Cabal was like one of my all-time favorites. And yeah, there were people just like completely dressed head to toe, like his characters, waiting in line to meet him and stuff. And that was pretty wild.
Yeah, that sounds fun.
I know. I mean, I'm definitely drawn to the macabre stuff too. Like, I think when I was a little kid, some of the stuff scared me, but it's like, how you kind of explore the things that scare you a little bit. And I think that I was that way. When I was 5, my mom took the 3 of us kids to California to spend Christmas with our grandparents. And we went to Disneyland on Christmas Day. And they had to stop the Haunted Mansion ride to take me off because I was so hysterical.
Oh,
yeah.
That's my Corey.
That's
So, when you first met, did you let each other know that you were into horror immediately, or was it like something slow, like, well, maybe I better not, I don't want to scare her off?
I think it was more like we both just liked pop culture so much that horror was kind of ingrained in it for us. So we kind of just were like, hey, I like watching this thing. And it's like, oh, cool. Let's check it out. And so even like The Walking Dead was going on around that time. It was kind of really big then. And so we were just like, oh, hey, The Walking Dead's on. Do you watch that? And then immediately we were just like, yeah, we watch it. And so we'd sit and watch it together. We watched it in bars with friends. We watched it with family. We would sit there and analyze The Walking Dead episodes after The Walking Dead. And that was before they started doing The Talking Dead. And that's back when cable was still kind of big. Before the streaming wars and everything kind of died down a little bit.
Exactly.
I think it was kind of just unsaid given the circles we ran in because, back then it was punk shows and just a lot of seeing each other in those circles. So it was kind of already just, in addition to the pop culture, we kind of just already assumed it knew.
It was before we started doing this podcast. I think it was just sort of in our subconscious that horror was something that we would turn to if we had a really bad day or something, like, let's put on a horror movie, not really understanding why I'm getting such great vibes at a horror convention. And it wasn't until I was at a horror convention last year that this aha moment arose. And it's so interesting how many people are like, yes, absolutely, horror is good for my anxiety. It's good for my depression. It's good for, it's an escape for me. So did you have that revelation yourselves?
It kind of just snapped together while writing our book together. And then it finally kind of cemented in discovering your podcast. I'm like, no, yeah, it all checks out. It makes sense. Other people are seeing it too now. It wasn't just a one-off with us that we started to experience this cathartic and kind of just therapeutic feeling. So grains of them were there throughout the whole process and in connecting with other people and just simply discussing. But I think it all was perfectly wrapped up with the book and with the podcast.
Yeah, discovering your podcast really made me analyze myself. And so I was like, what is it about horror that I really like, that really opened something up for me? And what I found was that I found a healing in community. And the thing is that I come from a very peppered past, and so being able to find people that I can actually sit and have a conversation with and discuss things, especially after a horror movie, and so you open up about fear that you usually talk about with family or talk about with friends. You can do that with, your partner. You can do that with just anyone that you want to watch a movie with, or even read a book with, if you write a book club or anything like that. And you can analyze these fears and these anxieties, and also talk about the social economical eras of the books or the stories themselves, of the movies. And so being able to do that with other people really meant a lot to me. And that's where I find my healing, is being able to bond with people.
For sure.
Yeah, same, absolutely. Well, and it's inspiring for us to see partners working together on a project. Kendall and I have been together for 20 years, and over the 20 years, we've helped each other with stuff like, I can help with my resume, or or my books and stuff like that. But it wasn't until we started our first podcast 3 years ago that we did a creative project together. And it's just definitely, it's like we talk about it daily. It's just become like the next chapter of our partnership. And it's just great. We love collaborating on it. Sometimes we have disagreements over this, that, and the other, but I would say 90% of the time we're on the same page. How did you decide to start collaborating on a book together?
When we weren't writing, we would just talk. She matched my weird. And so I matched her. It was a lot of improv throughout the house. Every morning cooking breakfast together, and jokes would be flying, and we would just be coming up with characters off the top of our head to mess around with. We honestly just worked off of each other so well when it came to everyday life, that when we started talking about these ideas and these stories, they started to pile up, and eventually we just looked at each other and went, do you want to write a book? Do you want to write a story together? And, should we turn this into something, or should we just not? Was that too much? Do you think that jumping into something like that is just not what our goals are? We both really love writing. So even before we got together, they were a writer. I was a writer. I've been writing since I was 15 or 13, actually. I started studying how to write when I was 15. It was a lot of me just writing things down and not knowing that there was key elements that you should add, or, the 3-act installment or anything like that. And then when I was 15, I haven't stopped reading ever since I was 15, just buying books on how to write a story, how to tell a story, the hero's arc, things like that. And so it just never stopped for me. And so we just looked at each other one day and went, let's apply our skill. Let's make something together. And we love what we've created.
Yeah, it felt really natural, given, as John had already described, we just worked so well with each other in all other aspects, creating characters, going off on improv, just any smaller story ideas. Even when John and I first got together, we were working on our own creative projects, had so many movie script ideas and concepts, and a few of them written out. I was delving more into graphic novels. So we would tell each other so much about our own ideas that we felt comfortable enough giving feedback and ideas to help the other. So it just made sense for us to go in on a book series of our own as equal partners.
Yeah. We got your message. I was immediately intrigued by your concept, because I love the idea of taking the classics and giving them a new spin, giving them a new life. Can you talk a little bit about the origin of the book and a little bit of the story? You don't have to give away everything.
Yeah, please don't.
So a majority of the story takes place in 1813 in the Kingdom of Holland. And we have a woman of high society who has to give up everything and rebuild her life with the common folk. And she can't help but have this impending anticipation, this fear of the monster she has created come back from her past and destroy everything that she's worked on to rebuild. The concepts for the story started back in 2020. We just had an array of ideas for it, and it made sense to bring it all together. It touches on a lot of themes of horror, sci-fi.
I think a lot of it also comes from when we started writing this idea. The first, because it's meant to be part of a series, this first book is Victoria Frankenstein. And so when we started writing this one, there weren't a lot of options. There wasn't a whole lot of stories out there about Frankenstein. Granted, I'm wrong. We've looked into it. There's like I think 14,000 reiterations of Frankenstein in literary form. Most of them are erotic, unfortunately. And then if you check out some of the movies, there's like I, Frankenstein, which, I mean, for a fun time, that's something to watch. But it's not generally something I prefer to put in my movie collection. And then the original is the only Frankenstein movie that I really refer to that I like, because I like the black and white, and I like the macabre, and I like the noir, contrast, and there's a gothic feeling to it. But I try and watch like the 1991 Frankenstein, and something just doesn't sit right with me, and it's not really like my thing. So I'm kind of excited for like Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, which comes out later this year, because it gives me more options. It gives me something else. You like Dracula, but you also like The Lost Boys. You have options to go to when you want to find these things. But for Frankenstein, it's so ingrained in pop culture and spooky culture, where you can find a dozen different kinds of masks, and you can see it plastered all over candy bags and everything. But when it comes to media, when it comes to consuming the stories, there's so little that isn't erotica that you can find and try and consume, and know that you enjoy going back to that story again and again. You could probably do that for Bram Stoker's Dracula, but it's hard to do that for Frankenstein. I would love to find a version out there in the world that I know I would be looking for. And that's something that we both came up with. We both were like, we want to tell a story that we know we would love to find, and that's something that we could return to over and over again.
Wow. We can't wait to see it.
Can you talk a little bit about the monster, the creature?
We were very particular with how we wanted to write the monster. We had underlying themes for how to present it, how to describe him. The word that would sum him up is a juggernaut.
Okay.
And we also wanted to kind of keep it in this realm of science fiction. We didn't want to go into some kind of paranormal or possibly like spiritual aspect. We wanted to keep it Frankenstein, So there's a lot of that grounded in real science that's in the book. And so and I'm going to spoil it, there's a bioluminescence that you can find in the ocean. And when it feels attacked, it starts to glow. You can probably Google some images of it, but on the shores, you'll see this like glow happen in certain areas. Sometimes I think Croatia, and the bioluminescence in the shore will start to glow because when it hits the shore, it thinks it's getting attacked. And so a glow will happen in the water, but it happens in their blood. So their veins glow. So what you see is the mapping of a human immune system in the dark, right? And for us, we thought, oh, how awfully terrifying to see something like that walking toward you in the night. So we cared a lot about keeping everything grounded in realism and science for Victoria Frankenstein. And
that's great. Yeah.
On top of that, there's a lot that went into building, not just like how we wanted to tell his story, but a lot into what he turns into in the story itself, which I won't give away.
Yeah.
Is there a sympathetic aspect to the creature?
There is, in essence. It has a lot to do with a lot of our underlying themes of a world built by kind children. Though creation in itself is faux, it's not a natural birthing. It is still life being created. It is still, in essence, some type of child. So in that, there is empathy that could be extended, but it doesn't take away the atrocities committed.
And you guys have little ones, right?
We do.
And how do they feel about horror in general and Halloween and all
Oh
that?
man. So she walks around the house and she says, "I'm a spooky girl." And then whenever I name a horror movie, she's like, "I don't like horror. I don't like scary movies." And then I'm like, "I'm gonna watch Killer Clowns from Outer Space right now." And she's like, "Oh, I love that movie. Love it. Oh, that movie's so good." We have a lot of conversation around this because she's turning 7, and when we introduce her to things like Killer Clowns from Outer Space, a lot of discussion happens during and after the movie that this is a fake scenario, that this is a special effects makeup, that what's happening, no one's really getting hurt. And to understand that doesn't change that she gets scared sometimes, but that's what we want. We want to show her these things so that she understands real world fears, something to actually be afraid of, and that she can recognize these red flags later. That's something that I learned when I was a kid, but it wasn't through horror movies. It was through America's Most Wanted on Fox. And my mom was like, "No, you got to learn. You got to learn about this stuff." It saved my life a dozen times. There were plenty of times I saw red flags, and I was like, if I didn't watch America's Most Wanted growing up, I don't know if I would have ever have known that. And so there's a lot of conversation that happens between us and our daughter. She happens to love a lot of the spookies, but we show her a few of the older horror movies, and we try and minimalize it because we don't want to show her everything, because not everything's for her. Not everything's meant for kids.
Right. But I applaud you both for doing that, because I feel like you just described my father when I was a child. He did exactly that. He loved horror, and so he didn't want me to not enjoy it, but he really did explain it to me. He really helped me. And I have to admit, I rarely got scared because I knew this is make-believe, and we talked about the themes. It was great. And I could see that my friends' parents definitely weren't doing that because these kids were terrified of their shadows.
I watched a friend of mine when I was like 9 get into a stranger's car, and he was like, "Come on." And I was like, "No." I was like, "You should get out. You should come with me." He didn't want to listen, and he went. And I didn't see him too much after that, but I know that he was okay. But it was still a very sketchy situation,
Yeah.
And you watch kids growing up, and you're going, "That's the red flag. Let me help you understand that." And they're like, "Why would I need to understand that?" And most of the time, they don't know until they know.
Right. Introducing the red flags and what to watch out for. My dad, on the other hand, kind of a flip side to Kendall's experience, he would let me watch horror movies, and he'd be the guy like, "I gotta go to the bathroom," and he'd come back with like a werewolf mask on and jump out, And sadly, I inherited that. And that it's like I never, because I'll spook Kendall sometimes accidentally, and it just pisses him off so much if I start laughing. But it's like, it's an accident.
Before we started recording, we were talking about Jason, I think, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to mention my daughter has a Jason mask. Yeah. She bought one for every time we, the Halloween season comes around, we walk through the aisles, and whatever mask she wants, I buy it. She doesn't ever really wear it for Halloween. She just likes having it. I bought her one of those fake butcher knives. Do you know what I mean? Like the plastic ones they sell for kids. So she ran around the house just like, just making that sound with a Jason mask on. And I was just like, I hope this is just a kid thing. But she has one of those Jason masks. I thought I wanted to bring that up early.
You have a good trick-or-treating area where you live?
I lived in Minnesota, or I grew up in Minnesota trick-or-treating. And we live in Arizona now. But our daughter was born in Minnesota. And the first time she went trick-or-treating was in Minnesota. And man, they just had one street designated for trick-or-treaters, and it was just a sea of kids, just like when I was a kid.
Every house went all out. It was wonderful.
So now it's like she has this social butterfly thing built into her, to where when we go out trick-or-treating, she just goes up to every kid and is like, "Hey, can I go with you to the next house? Can I run up with you?" And it's really nice to see her just be this amazingly kind child for someone who loves spooky things and horror in general.
That's awesome. Yeah, we've been living in this house for a few years, and the previous owners, they left us a nice letter of like, here's who we recommend for maintenance and yada yada. One of the things on there was, Halloween is very big in this neighborhood. Make sure you have enough candy. And they weren't kidding. Like it gets bigger every year. Like I stopped counting at like 250 kids this past year. And now last year we didn't run out of candy. And so like the final kid was like lucked out because I'm like, we don't want it. Dump it all, take it all. And there was probably like a pound of candy there. Well, we went through, I think 30 or 40 pounds this year, but I also, because we had just launched the podcast, I put our Horror Heels business cards out there and said, well, these are for mom and dad, and then this candy's for you. And, just taking a walk around the neighborhood a couple of months ago, like one of our neighbors we don't really know, we're just like, hey, we're checking out your podcast. Awesome. So it's like, okay,
wonderful.
Right. Bonus.
Yep.
But yeah, it's so cool to see. It takes you back to your childhood, when you see all these kids just having a great time and cool costumes and very polite, because like I won't necessarily be out there the whole time, but sometimes I'll have to go back in and refill the candy bowl, and you see, like I can see through the window, like they're taking one or two pieces. Nobody's getting crazy or anything. Very polite children around here.
I have listened to a handful of Horror Heels. I've seen, I forget his name, and I apologize for that, but he did the biggest collection of Goosebumps. I remember him.
Yes.
And so I've seen a handful. I don't think I've ever heard about your dog.
Oh, our babies.
Maybe I missed that
Yes.
of them. What's your dog?
Oh yeah, this is one of them. We're crazy. We don't have children, but we have 6 little dogs.
Oh, okay.
He's the big one.
Yeah, he's 16 pounds, and then the littlest is
6
and
pounds.
he stays downstairs during recording because
little one.
the
Yeah,
little
yeah.
one, because he would make himself known.
Oh yeah.
Makes sense.
All 6 pounds of him.
Oh, he'd be bouncing off of us right now.
Well, I would love to see their Halloween costumes this year. That'd be great.
Yes.
Absolutely, yeah. When we were living in California, the company that I worked for was a pet supply company, and I did marketing and community outreach for them, but they always had the cutest little Halloween costumes. Our Italian Greyhound was like a dragon one year, and we had a little devil horn for our Phoebe because
Tiny ducks. And
yeah, and we even dressed the cat up one, Poor Mr. Birdie was a princess for Halloween.
Oh.
It's very cute. Well, I'm just curious, and this is something that we wouldn't necessarily know, but you mentioned that you enjoy graphic novels and things. Are either of you visual artists as well?
We both are, actually.
That's what I thought.
I
Yeah.
did the main design for our cover for our novel, and I've also been running through and mapping out what we have planned for the series, and that's just done with photography and manipulation through photography. But outside of that, we've always been artists, whether it's lead pencils, paints, gouache, alcohol markers, digital art. We're artists in many different forms.
So when we get the book, are we going to be able to physically see Victoria and the creature?
Probably not in this edition, but we did play around with the idea about a year ago in possibly turning it into a comic. Maybe something we'll revisit in the future. At the moment, we're just kind of focusing on the storytelling.
Well, I think it's smart to create that anticipation with the readers.
Yeah, there's one of the earlier episodes of Horror Heels. Our guest is our friend Jim Ousley, who is a horror comic writer. Maybe you find some inspiration in that episode, and I'd be happy to connect you with him too. He's a great guy if you're just looking for input, that sort of thing.
Oh, that would be lovely.
Like
Yeah.
talking to people like that.
Yeah, very cool. Well, as a listener, I'm guessing you're aware of our final question that we ask everybody. And I'm excited to get 2 answers out of this. So, who is your favorite final person in a horror movie? The survivor.
Oh,
I know. It's tough.
it has to be from Ready or Not at the moment. I love how I love how she managed to come through. It's devastating because all this girl wanted was her own family. And so what is supposed to be the happiest day of her life, but to kind of just see her come into her own and be left standing it's so cathartic and wonderful to see that journey over the course of the night and the elation I felt, essentially.
Yeah.
It's probably
I'm excited to see what they do with the sequel, just because
right.
it's so trippy at the end. But I got to say, like, well, part of me would have loved to see the grandma survive, just because, like, she was just so menacing, like holding that giant axe, you know, just had the perfect look on her face, just like, oh man, I don't want to be anywhere near this lady.
Just kind of deadpan staring at her. So
Such a good
Yeah.
Very well done.
like number 2 in like the most euphoric ending for me. And you know, you watch her go through all of this turmoil, and when everything is said and done and she's walking out kind of processing, like, did I just see the devil incarnate? And she's walking out just covered in blood, her wedding dress just red now, and she just sits down and has a cigarette. That was extremely euphoric, like just watching her just be relieved everything's over with. On top of that, she inherits everything. She's married to that family now.
True. Very true.
But I'd say that my favorite is probably my number 1 euphoric moment, and that would, or euphoric ending. It's Daniel Craig in Dreamhouse. And in Dreamhouse, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but
in fact, I don't even remember the premise, but I can see the poster in my mind.
he thinks he's being haunted. He thinks he's being haunted by a woman and 2 children, and he ends up finding out that he had brain damage because while murdering his wife and children, they hit him in the head and gave him brain damage. So now he doesn't remember that he killed his own family. And now he keeps reliving it. But there's this kind of mystery that unravels that tells the story that he didn't really do that he was framed for a nefarious reason. And he ends up finding out that he really is being haunted by his wife and his kids, so that he can try and find some resolution, just a way to cope and to get over it. And at the end, when he finally finds who did it, who killed his wife and kids, he sees their ghosts again, and he comes to cope. And it's so euphoric for me because I'm just like, what a revelation to just move on from such a loss. And it's movies like that. Like, I only watched it maybe twice, but it's up there in like one. Like, I recommend that movie to a lot of people, but I only watch it very little because it makes me cry. I'm like, I hold it in high regard, but I still won't watch it very often.
Yeah.
It sounds like one that we're going to have to dig back up, because I'm remembering bits and pieces as you're telling the story, but it made me think one of Kendall's favorites that he asks to watch once a month is The Others with Nicole Kidman.
Oh,
yeah.
And it sounds like it's got a similar vibe of loss and coping and coming to resolution. So yeah, we'll have to dig that one up.
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen The Others. Since
Really?
Yeah. It's funny because, no offense to her, in general, I wouldn't seek out Nicole Kidman to watch. But I do think, so I'm trying to be nice, but I think she does well in that. And I just love the story, you know, so it's probably as much about the story as it is the acting for me. But
I think like the top 3 horror movies or series that Kendall will ask to watch over and over again would be The Others, the Friday the 13th series, which is his favorite slasher series.
it is.
And oh my gosh, The Village. I just think it's great. We both think it's great, and it was mismarketed as like a horror movie, you know, because and I think people were disappointed that it turned out to not be a traditional horror movie, but there are certainly some horror elements to it.
There's a series that we recommend to a lot of people, which is the Fear Street series. It's the trilogy, and that one is so underrated. Like, we hear so little about it, and we're like, more people should watch it.
We have watched those. Yeah. I actually watched, after Kendall fell asleep last night, I had to watch the new Prom one.
We had a lot of fun with that one too.
It's just, you know, it's clever, and it's just like, yeah, it's gory, but it's like funny gory. Like,
it's like,
oh, you were awake for part of it, because like the guy gets both of his hands cut off from the slicer thing, and he's like trying to open up doors.
Yeah, you're not supposed to chuckle, but I did.
Yeah, it was like, it was.
And it's
I thought he was asleep, and all of a sudden I just hear him like.
Fear Street's like the goosebumps for all the people that grew up, you know.
I hope they keep doing them.
I do too.
They're breathing new life into those.
Absolutely. And one thing to comment on Fear Street is the creative kills that they've come up with, because I'm sure everyone in school has thought about those paper cutters at some point. So I'm glad that was utilized, to be honest. And same with the first one with the bread cutter, just such creative and gruesome kills there.
Yes. I can't imagine they still have those in schools.
I know. We kind of had we have at home office. I mean, we have one. So
Okay.
And I nicked my finger on that. It's not.
Yeah.
I was lucky.
It's so funny that this came up because last week I had to put a new, bigger sign by the one in my office because I just watch people and I'm like, I don't know how this hasn't turned into a workers' comp thing for me, because I'm the HR guy. I'm like, this is not, I don't want to deal with severed fingers, please.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
I used to work at the nearby community college. So we had one in our office. And I don't know how many times I was walking by and I had to put the blade down because someone would just leave it up. So
I know.
that's just asking for a horrendous
goodness.
accident to occur.
Safety
Yep.
first.
Yeah,
Just make sure your blade stays on tight so your daughter's not running around with
Yeah,
the handle
yeah.
instead of the big widow.
That's nowhere within reach here.
Absolutely not.
my sign, I should take a picture of it. It says, please lower the arm, to keep everyone safe. And then at the bottom I said, no, seriously. Like that.
Should get a picture of the guy from Fear Street and put it on.
Yeah, exactly.
I should.
Accidents happen.
Yeah.
Be careful at work.
Vienna, John, it's been a joy meeting you, and we can't wait for October for many reasons, but we're very much looking forward to reading the book. Please stay in touch, and we'd love to have you back on once we get an opportunity to read the book.
Oh, that would be lovely.
we
Yeah.
had an
Thank you
absolute
so
blast.
much.
You guys are fun. Victoria Frankenstein, The Dread Legacies Book 1 comes out October 1st. Pre-orders will be up shortly, but for now, look out for it. That's it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Let us know when the pre-orders go live, and we'll push it out on our social.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Sure.
no, we appreciate you doing that.
Yep,
And it's
too.
again, it's beautiful to see a couple, creative partnering together and putting more horror out into the world. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
It's the season that brings everyone together.
That's right.
How much do we love Vienna and John? Let us count the chills. I don't know what's scarier. Glowing juggernaut creatures, or the fact that I used to run around my house with a werewolf mask scaring people. Wait, no. It's definitely the fact that my dogs have better Halloween costumes than I do. So if you want to keep up with Vienna and John, and you should, keep your eyes peeled this October for Victoria Frankenstein, The Dread Legacies Book 1. We'll drop the pre-order link as soon as it goes live. And if this episode gave you goosebumps in a good way, share it with your horror fan. Tag us, and remember, whether it's a haunted novel, a movie marathon, or watching Fear Street for the 14th time, horror connects us, heals us, and makes us feel a little less alone in the dark. Until next time, I'm Corey. Don't forget And don't forget, when someone asks, is horror good for mental wellness? You tell them, of course it is. The Horror Heals podcast is produced and presented by How the Cow Ate the Cabbage, LLC.